Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have what I'm calling my 5 publishing suggestions for Star Wars and Lucasfilm. So these are just 5 ideas that I have that I think are simple changes that I think would significantly help Star Wars publishing and would take it in fun, unique ways. Now, I think the one that most people are thinking of and the suggestion that it's talked about a lot as one that I'm not going to make here go into detail is the bring back and publish Legends novels. That is a can of worms that is a long discussion, and while I have many thoughts, good and bad, about Legends, I don't have time to get into all of them in this video. So I'm not going to be suggesting that, but I do have several ideas for the publishing lines that I think will help. And I specifically have ideas for middle grade and for adult. I think that I can significantly help. I have some ideas for both of those lines. So let's start with my first idea, which is for middle grade. And my idea for a middle grade series is to do a series of middle grade novels told in the same format of a long form story featuring a few amount of characters, like either the Jedi Apprentice series by Jude Watson or the Young Jedi Knights books by Kevin Anderson and Rebecca Mesta, and I'll use one of these as an example. The reason that this series worked and the Jude Watson series worked is because you're following all these books that are essentially standalone largely, but they each build off of each other, and so eventually you have climactic events happen. And they're middle grades, so they're really good at getting younger kids involved, but at the same time, they're also easily accessible to adults because they're basically like novellas for adults. I think that you could easily do something like that, and the closest I think we've really gotten in the canon to this is in the High Republic. There were 2 novels that featured the same characters. You had A Test of Courage, which at the time I actually gave a lower rating than I should have. I think I should have given it a better rating. And then I have Mission to Disaster, which I loved. It's one of my favorite Star Wars middle grade books, if not my favorite middle grade in the canon. And these books followed 2 Jedi, a Master and Apprentice, one as they are becoming the Master and Apprentice, and then one partway into their time together. And while I really liked the ideas here, because there was like another book that was sandwiched in the middle that had nothing to do with these characters and followed totally other characters, the High Republic books didn't feel as jointed together as they should have because of that. If they had only followed these characters, this would have been exactly what I'm looking for, but it's not. But if we could get a middle grade series, and really you could play around with the timeline, you could set it in the High Republic, you could set it in the prequel era, you could set it Master and Apprentice that are in exile post Order 66, or maybe even, if they were bold enough, to do one Master and Apprentice during Luke's time with his academy. Maybe he had a Master and Apprentice that were separated from the rest of the academy. I don't know, but there's ways you could do it. And I think that would really help get a younger audience in reading, and also would make adults happy that are able to read the middle grade when it works for them. So that's my first suggestion. My second suggestion is also for middle grade. This is my only other middle grade suggestion. All the rest of them are for the adult novels. My other suggestion is to do more short story collections in a specific style that they did. So they've released 2 short story collections. They did Star Wars The Clone Wars Stories of Light and Dark, and then they did Star Wars Stories of Jedi and Sith. Now, this one was, the Stories of Light and Dark from Clone Wars was almost entirely novelizations of episodes. It was basically an episode or 2 episodes or 3, and in one case 4 episodes, scrunched down into a short story length. And this made it that you weren't getting much original storytelling. You got a little bit because you were getting it inside the head of the character instead of just seeing the character as they're portrayed in the Clone Wars. But you really weren't adding too much. There was one short story at the end that was really good, that was original, but that's it. Whereas you have Stories of Jedi and Sith, where every story was original, they were nice and long, they had time. There's only one story in here that I think is a stinker. Every other story was, I thought, superb. And I thought that these short stories were really fun to read. And I think that this is a style that they should go more in the future for Star Wars middle grade short story collections. I really enjoy some of the short stories in the From a Certain Point of View books, but those can be exhausting to read because there's so many of them and they're so vastly different, and also because of just the decisions they made when editing those. Then you have something like this, where it was like 10 or 12 short stories, so it's manageable. It's in middle grade format, so it's really easy to read, and they have the nice illustrations here, and it's a nice design of a book. And it's a bit thicker of a book, it's a big book, it's a clunker, but I think it was worth it. And if we had more of these, set them in different eras. Do one of these books set in the High Republic era. Do one of these set in the New Jedi Order, not New Jedi Order, but like the Republic era, featuring, Finn, Rey, Poe, all those characters. Do one of these during the Purge, during Order 66, or, set one of these on Mandalore. Do these middle grade collections that are easy to read, nice and fun, and are original content, not just novelizations, but original content, and with the nice artwork, and make it worth the while of the reader. That's where I would go if I was able to make suggestions. I think that this was a superb book from last year. Really did not get the discussion on YouTube that it should have gotten, but this was a good way to go, and this is where I think they should go. So those are my middle grade thoughts. Let's get into my suggestions for what I would do with the adult novels. So my first suggestion is to do an Old Republic trilogy and make it big and epic. So one sect of the fandom that I think has had trouble integrating into the canon is the people who were big old school fans of the Old Republic. Because we've gotten the High Republic, which has worked for some people, but was too big and too different and too stylized that it didn't feel like the Old Republic. So it just didn't work as well. I would make the suggestion that we do the Old Republic do a trilogy, set it during a specific time in the Old Republic, and make it a really, you're only covering a few years at most. So you can basically tell whatever kind of story you want. You're not going to step on anyone's toes, and you can make it big and galaxy spanning, but you don't have to tell the big, you don't have to do the huge, Revan or the huge Rule of Two or something like that. You can just tell a fun story. You can just tell an Old Republic era story, and I think that doing something like that would really win them over. For a while, we thought that we were getting an Old Republic trilogy from Benioff and Weiss. Thank goodness we're not. We thought we were getting that, and I was like, that's going to scratch that itch for that part of the fandom. And I'm not the biggest Old Republic fan. The Darth Bane trilogy is not my favorite trilogy. I'm not a big video game person, so it's not like this is just selfishly for me. I think this is what the fandom would want, is to do a good, solid Old Republic trilogy, and make sure you have a good author behind it. Don't just throw an author who you want to give support. Like, throw an author that understands the Old Republic, understands what that fandom wants, things like that. So then my fourth overall suggestion, this is another adult one, is to do a Jedi series, book series, of interconnected books set during the Clone Wars. So one of the things that the Clone Wars did was the TV show let us pop around the galaxy. But the problem was most of the TV show focused on A+ Jedi. I'm talking like Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, and maybe every once in a while you got a random Kit Fisto here, Mace Windu here. But overall you're following Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka. And that was because those were characters that would bring in a big audience, and when you minimize the number of actors that you need, it's cheaper that way. But with books, you could tell whatever story you want, and if you create an original master and apprentice, or at least make the master an established character and give them an original apprentice, something like that, but you make an adult novel, so you're telling full-length, big, epic stories, but set it during the old Clone Wars era, you could make this series, and as you're going along, you could make references to things that are happening in the Clone Wars TV show, and reference, oh yeah, well, there's that big battle happening on Christophsis. All right, so you know where in the storyline it is. Then you talk about, oh my goodness, Coruscant was just attacked, and that goes towards the end of the series. And so you could really make this an interesting storytelling, you could really make this connect to Clone Wars fans and people who just want those Jedi and Master and Apprentice type stories. I think those are the backbone of Star Wars, is a Jedi Master and Apprentice style story. I think that fandom really likes it, the publishing likes it. I think those are good stories, and so I think that type of a series set in the Clone Wars would be really successful. And if you want to set it at another time, do it in the prequels, that's fine, but I think doing this in the timeline of the Clone Wars is specifically my suggestion. So my fifth and final suggestion is, I don't want to call it a sequel because it wouldn't be a direct sequel, but it would be in the same style of. So we got the novel Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, and it features Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and it's my favorite canon novel. I think we should get the same type of story, but specifically get the Satine and Obi-Wan novel. A lot of fans have been eager to get a Satine and Obi-Wan novel. It's been, their story and relationship has been talked about in the Clone Wars. It's been referenced in other novels. It's been talked about, by the creators and the creatives at Lucasfilm. Like, that is a story that the fandom is itching to get, and we just haven't gotten it yet. I don't know whether that's because Filoni and the team there has a purpose for that, if they're going to use that somewhere, or if it's just, no, this is off limits. But I think that's a storyline that the fandom would unite behind, and if you got the right author, I think that Claudia Gray would be the right author to do it, although I'd be open to potential other authors. But if you got someone like that to write that story, I think that it would be great for the fandom. So those are my 5 suggestions for what I would do. Obviously, I'm very much like a Jedi focus. I think that's going back to those roots would be very helpful, but I'm open to other suggestions. Which of these do you think is the most reliable and most plausible, and which one of them do you want to most see? Leave me those thoughts. Or do you hate one of my ideas? You say, Jonathan, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Let me know that. I can handle it. I have thick enough skin. I'd love to hear all your thoughts on my suggestions down below in the comments section. And if you have a new suggestion, an original suggestion that I didn't bring up, why don't you talk about that? So until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.